brain have. And we've all heard about the various nutritional deficiencies that are breaking our brains, from pioneers like Dr. Amen and his revolutionary brain scans to Dr. Mark Hyman's functional medicine approach, and on and on. But there is one most important aspect they have all dropped the ball on, and that's movement. As you will learn in this video, I'm going to explore what now more than 10,000 studies confirm. I'm also going to explain the neural-brain immune function and show you the science behind this brain interaction and your immune system so you can better protect yourself against the cold and flu season. Heck, I'm going to show you the connection between the broken brains and sinus issues. So let's dive right in. Movement is the motor that drives the brain, what experts call sitting disease or gravity deprivation syndrome or vertebral subluxations. And in this video, I'm going to explain how the chiropractor is the mechanic for the brain. Let's begin. So what is chiropractic care? How are they the mechanic for the brain? Well, in my new book, The 5 Pillars of a Dynamic Health, I give a parallel description to understanding man's essential need for chiropractic care. That's right. I said essential need for chiropractic care for the family. Not just when you have pain, but as a necessary way of life for the industrialized human. Well, let me explain. The International Union for Conservation of Natural Resources report that there are over 1.5 million documented species on planet Earth. And most species require some form of movement pathways as an essential nutrient to charge the brain to survive, grow, reproduce, adapt, and evolve. There are over 30,000 different species of fish and over 5,000 different species of mammals that have specific sensory organs that detect movement. Fish, for example, have a system of sensory organs that detects changes in the movement called a lateral line system. And the Encyclopedia of Britannica explains this very well. They say that the lateral line system, also called the lateralis system, is a system of tactile sense organs that are unique to aquatic vertebrates from fish to amphibians that senses, detects movement and pressure changes in the surrounding water. It's made up of a series of mechanoreceptors called neuromasts, also called lateral line organs, that are arranged in an interconnected network along the head and the body. So in contrast to the over 30,000 different species of fish, human beings also have a system of sensory organs. In fact, the most heavily populated area for these sensory organs in humans are also called mechanoreceptors, and they're a specific type of sensory organ that detects movement. So similar to fish, in humans, they also exist along the head, neck, back, and the body, but they are most heavily populated along the spinal joints of the vertebral column. And this is where science has dropped the ball on movement, right? Because movement reception over the last millennium especially has been, well, we haven't quite understood it. But it's not just about exercise. In fact, movement is an essential requirement for both the underwater world and the terrain world stimulated by these mechanoreceptors. Movement pathways charge both the brain and the spinal cord, the central nervous system, through a 4-step process shared by both species as discovered by various academic and research institutions. It's a complicated process, so for our purpose, I'm going to simplify it so we can assimilate and use it to improve our way of life right now. So at this point in our story, we've determined that movement charges the brain and the spinal cord, the central nervous system, and we have determined that this process applies to an aquatic vertebrate, 30,000 species of fish and other amphibians due to its lateral line system and the spinal movement pathways in human beings. Thanks to a quick lesson in marine biology and neuroscience, we're going to connect the dots of the various scientific discoveries and examine a specific path in both species that validates the need for proper movement for the electrical charge of the brain and the spinal cord, the central nervous system, that require in both species in order to survive, to grow, to reproduce, adapt, and evolve. Again, this is a genetic requirement versus a need. The genome of both species require it. Basic neuroscience explains the movement to brain pathways and how they are essential for both species. Sensory information reaches the central nervous system through the process of these 4 things. Let's go through those. Number 1, stimulation. The physical stimulus or movement on the sensory receptors. And again, underwater, it's the mechanical movement of the water hitting these sensors, or the air in the windmill, right? In humans, it's the mechanical movement of the spine that's turning on these specialized sensors called sensory receptors. Number 2, transduction. So movement stimulus provides the electrical chemical impulse and makes a connection to another neuron branch. In other words, the mechanical movement creates the electrical connections between the two nerves. Number 3, nerve transmission, right? Movement stimulates and activates a tiny neuron called an axon, which conducts electrical impulse, increasing the electrical potential or the action potential along a specific pathway. It's called the afferent pathway in the brain and spinal cord. In other words, the mechanical stimulation of movement provides the electrical charge through the nerves to the brain. Number 4, we've got interpretation. So the brain creates the sensory perception of the event to the movement pathways called afferentation. Afferentation. So the brain identifies the stimulus. It processes it and interprets it through the central nervous system stimulation of movement. Once again, to summarize on both species, movement pathways activate 4 things: stimulation, then transduction, then transmission, then the central nervous system receives the input and interprets it. Now, the brain receives this charge as an electrical potential, which projects to the different brain regions associated with different sensory modalities. Now, the amount of charge the brain gets is going to be determined by 2 things. Let me cover that. Number 1, by the intensity of the sensation based on the frequency of nerve impulse from the mechanical stimulation or movement patterns. And number 2, by the information based on the identity of transmitting neurons and the frequency of movement patterns. So after the brain interprets this information, it sends out a charge through the spinal cord to every target cell, tissue, gland, and system of the body. And this is called nerve-to-nerve signaling, okay? And once again, the amount of charge going from the brain gets determined by the intensity plus the frequency of impulse that's created from movement, and identity plus frequency of information generated from movement. Bear with me as I get through this geek stuff, but I'm having fun. The nerve impulse to the brain and the spinal cord, or the central nervous system, is created, and it's transmitted and intensified by mechanoreceptors, which again are most populated along the human spine and stimulated from the mechanical movement of the spine. So this pathway of sensory information to the central nervous system is shared by most living animals, and it requires movement as an essential nutrient for their way of life. Anyone who doubts this needs to look at Dr. Wolpert's work with the sea squirt. I did another video on Facebook on the sea squirt. Check it out. Okay, now that we have reviewed basic science, let's explain what a chiropractic adjustment does through science. The mechanical adjustment given by the chiropractor activates his mechanoreceptors, or specialized sensory organs along spinal joints, which of course charge the brain and the spinal cord, the nerves, the tissues, the cells, and the organs, and on and on. And we said that the amount of charge the brain gets, I know it's repetitive, is determined by intensity and the frequency of the impulse from it, and identity and frequency of the information from the movement patterns, all of which is going to be determined by the amount of movement we get throughout during our day. Now the question is, how much movement does the human spine require in a day? And the short answer, 8 to 10 miles of walking done sporadically throughout the day. In a normal functioning spine, walking, running, jogging mechanically stimulates the movement of the spine, which acts like a windmill that generates all these things we are discussing. But in a dysfunctional spine, a spine that does not generate 8 to 10 miles of movement, that dampens the normal activity of the brain and the spinal cord, the central nervous system. It dampens every tissue, cell, and organ that it supplies. So your quality of life is diminished, and it's stressed. We need only look at NASA's gravity studies to know that humans require mechanical loading or gravity and mechanical movement of a proper functioning spine generated by walking on a daily basis. That generates the proper nerve-to-nerve signaling, or the nerve-to-tissue signaling, nerve-to-gland signaling, nerve-to-hormone signaling, nerve-to-cell signaling, nerve-to-brain signaling, nerve-to-organ signaling. And due to our sedentary lifestyle, which is validated by over 10,000 studies on sitting disease, or the effects sitting has on spinal immobility, or spinal dysfunction and nerve-to-nerve signaling, among others, the brain is not receiving the proper charge it needs. So the result of this inactivity and lack of movement diminishes nerve signaling to the brain, and it diminishes the quality of life of every known system in the human body. Another reason why just 1 week of astronauts in outer space, they suffer like 35 years of ill health effects due to an inability of moving the spine with gravity. In fact, recent anthropology studies suggested that the hippocampus portion of the brain has shrunk by 40% as compared to our hunter-gatherer ancestors because we don't move anymore. Why should we care about that? Because you and I have a hunter-gatherer genome. No one in science denies this. Therefore, we have the same genetic requirements as our hunter-gatherer ancestors who hunted and gathered for food, spending massive amounts of movement and energy in order to do so. So a keen understanding of the need for lifestyle chiropractic care, as I like to call it, comes from a distinction between exercise and movement. The various sciences, as I can see from my perspective, are very clear. Exercise is movement, but the movement is not always exercise. Movement transcends and includes our exercise. So NASA scientist Dr. Joan Vernico's wisdom, she can help with some suggestions. Besides having every member of your family's spine regularly checked by a chiropractor and your teeth regularly checked by a dentist for good hygiene, here are a few tips from NASA that you can do at home. I call it the NASA-inspired ultimate way to move your day. So number 1, get a chiropractic adjustment regularly because it will amplify your results in all of your movement goals. Number 2, constantly change your posture. Stretch often, even while sitting, especially when you're typing. Number 4, stand and move while you're typing. 5, keep a 30-minute timer on your wrist while at the computer and get up and move every 30 minutes from 1 to 7 minutes. Do jumping jacks, do burpees, do squats, stretch some more. So reading while stretching on the ground with a bunch of dynamic positions instead of a locked sitting position is very important. And get more walks throughout the day, even if it's a quick 5 to 10 minute walk. And finally, get on the monkey bars with your kids, right? And play with them at the playground. It's a bit too cold for them to be out right now. But we want to live like a wild human, but without leaving our current comfort and tech of today. So change your environment often throughout the day. Change is your 5 pillars of a dynamic health. We are changing our sedentary behavior to a new empowered lifestyle that mimics that of nature and resembles that of our human ancestors. Therefore, chiropractic care is a medical field that focuses on treating disorders within the nervous system and the musculoskeletal system, but we primarily treat movement disorders or movement deficiencies. Most know that chiropractors specialize in helping alleviate pain in the back, the neck, the joints, the arms, legs, and the head without the assistance of drugs or surgery. So chiropractors perform a spinal alignment or an adjustment by manually applying a controlled force onto the targeted joints and tissues to improve functioning by stimulating those sensory organs we just talked about, which of course you know charge the brain, cells, tissues, and organs in the body. In other words, by restoring normal spinal function, it in turn restores normal brain, tissues, and cells and organ function, as evident by basic science. We're fixing broken brains. And despite popular belief, chiropractic adjustments are normally not a source of discomfort for patients, and our mild soreness found the treatment is quickly fleeting in hours, just as this wind that's suddenly coming right now in this cold. So the adjustments are effective at restoring mobility, alleviating discomfort or pain, reducing muscle tension, and enabling the tissues to heal properly, just as the wind calmed down. So besides chiropractic's unique role in fixing broken brains, whenever you receive a chiropractic adjustment, There are 5 big scientific research ideas that are happening following a chiropractic adjustment. Let's get over those. 1, you get a boost of immunity by 200 to 400%. Number 2, you improve overall brain and overall body function. 3, you improve your metabolism. 4, you improve your ability for tissues to regenerate and heal. 5, you actually increase skeletal muscle, making you stronger and more durable. Like I said, chiropractic care is more than treating a specific ailment. It is about helping patients achieve the highest possible level of care for mind, body, and spirit. Chiropractors are highly specialized doctors, able to educate patients on all natural methods to improve overall wellness for a broad range of health topics. Chiropractors can provide nutritional guidance to create a more healthy diet, full of all the nutrition-packed food that will support your system through the seasonal changes, such as this. So after all that background, how does chiropractic care help fight colds and flu? Well, when the spine is adjusted into a proper position, it's moving properly, the nerves housed in the human nervous system will benefit from the dramatic boost in the functioning. Since the fragile network of tiny signals can easily be scrambled, it is vital that the back is aligned to remove any subluxations or spinal dysfunctions and improve the effectiveness of that spine that's sending fuller messages to the brain. Therefore, when your nervous system is well supported, your entire body will be strengthened to take on the war against the common cold and the flu. Again, this is not theoretical construct or cherry-picking science here. In a recent study that was published in the Chiropractic and Manual Therapies journals, discovered that chiropractic care may have an even stronger positive impact than previously hypothesized. And the study found that participants who received just one single chiropractic spinal adjustment experienced significant improvements in the immune system functioning. And after the very first visit of the first adjustment, the participants' production and overall count of white blood cells increased. And since these specialized cells are responsible for fighting off all the viruses and creepy crawly things that our immune system encounters on a daily basis, this is statistically significant support that chiropractic care can help fend off a cold. That was fake, but you got it. Significant evidence has also demonstrated that upper cervical neck adjustments during chiropractic care can also help chronic sinus infection sufferers who experience a flare-up multiple times a year. Excess tension in the neck interferes with the nervous system's natural ability to communicate with the sinus passages, and as a result, there's a buildup of pressure in the sinuses and a decreased outlet for the fluids to drain from the cavity. With the fluid stagnating in your sinuses, it creates this ideal breeding ground for the bacteria that cause sinus infections. Now, although antibiotics will help to kill the bacteria, the remaining fluid in the sinuses will cause the problem to keep reoccurring. Therefore, the upper cervical neck adjustments, they ensure that the tension is properly relieved on the brainstem. Thus, it enables the sinus passages to naturally clear. Many patients with a sinus infection will feel their sinuses begin to drain within 5 to 10 minutes after I give them the adjustment. Now, although the medical research and science supports the claim that chiropractic care boosts the functioning of the immune system, the best evidence comes from patients who have experienced this phenomena for themselves. After being adjusted, it's very common for chiropractic patients who are feeling under the weather to report feeling a clear decrease in their symptoms. So patients often notice reduced sinus pressure, reduced headaches, nasal drainage, or runny nose, sore throat, body muscle aches, and even overall fatigue or malaise start to go away. In addition, patients who maintain routine chiropractic treatments also tend to become ill less often and experience less severe symptoms than those who do not receive the chiropractic care. And of course, this is a major focus in our office, as nearly half of our patients are children and infants. If making it through the winter season without missing days at work or school, or scheduling expensive trips to see your physician sounds appealing, start taking charge of your health by consulting with the trained chiropractic team. While there's no silver bullet to treating all common colds, receiving chiropractic care is proven to be an effective way to support the immune system and minimize the risk of catching the viruses in the first place. So along with preparing your home and vehicle for the long winter ahead, be sure to keep your health in mind by making a visit to your local chiropractor to have a cold, flu, and sinus-free season. And for those of you who still want to hear more of the science behind this, watch my video on immunity and the chiropractic approach, where I really go deeper on concepts. I call it my Star Trek nerdy geeky version video. Look forward on my Monday Morning Moments series on Facebook. Until next time, lighten up, move better, and live fuller. I'm Dr. Matt Hammett, reminding you that it is always a great idea to have your kiddos checked by a family-based chiropractor. I hope you enjoy this video and others like it, so you can be more engaged in your spinal hygiene for your family and for your friends. And as always, we invite you to become patients in our practice, and if you already are, kudos to you and your family. Help us spread our message by becoming fans on our Facebook page and sharing this video with your loved ones. May God bless.